Good morning on the West Coast, good afternoon on the East Coast, and welcome to 30 Minutes of Better Business Results. My name is John Whitt, and I'm your host. We're the show that works with business owners, helps business owners get a little better each week at advancing their business and growing their business. The concept here is that if you create 3 action items a week, in 1 week it's probably not that big a deal, but after a month you've done 12, and they compound on top of each other. After a year, maybe you've got 100 or 150 action items. What would that do for your business? We know that there are close to 53 million freelance contractors in the United States today. We know that the Great Recession, which fortunately we've kind of come out of, generated, 50% of the people. We lost 7.5 million jobs in the Great Recession, and 50% of those were middle management jobs. And a lot of people had to go out and start their own business, because those are the people that really, they don't have a problem getting up in the morning. They don't have a problem going to work. They don't have a problem working hard, right? But the jobs weren't available, so they went and started their own. And when it comes to running a new business, becoming an entrepreneur, sometimes it's like starting a whole new career. And we're here to work with you and help you advance that career on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. Today we've got our guest, our special guest is Katie Wagner with Katie Wagner Social Media.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Let's have a seat.
Okay.
So Katie, you've been a journalist, you've been on television, ABC, CBS. Tell us a little bit more about your background and how did you get into the social media business?
Sure. So I spent 15 years as a journalist. The first 7 I was in radio, and the last 8 or so I was in television. I was an anchor. And what happened in the last 5 years of my career was that social media became popular, and social media was changing the way people interacted with TV. They didn't go home to watch the evening news anymore because they could get headlines on Facebook and Twitter. They could see any video they wanted on YouTube. And so I was actually trained to use social media as a journalist. And it became my job not only to tell stories on radio and TV, but to tell them on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and use these channels regularly. So at some point in 2010, I decided that it was time to leave journalism behind and go with the way things were going, and I started a social media agency to help business owners tell their story.
And your agency is a little bit unique in the sense that everybody's a journalist.
That's true. That's
which is different. I've talked to and met with and worked with many in the social media industry business. It's an interesting business because often I don't get the same story and the same strategy from 2 different people. Yeah. Although from a journalist standpoint, one of the things that intrigues you at your company and to spending some time with you is that you're looking at it from a journalism perspective as opposed to just a technical perspective about how this works or how that works. Mm-hmm. And so tell me, how are you applying that journalism perspective? How does that make you guys a little different than all the others?
So I don't actually think social media is about the tech. I think it's about the communication. Business owners have always looked for ways to connect with their audience and build that emotional connection between their brand and the people they want to serve. And we now have new tools to do that. And so I think the most important part of social media is telling the story of your business, is learning how to build that bridge and get them to feel that emotional connection for you. And, marketers say things like build the know, like, and trust factor. But it's true. People do business with people they know, like, and trust. And social is a great tool for that. So at my shop, we work with journalists because journalists are professional storytellers. We understand how to identify what's special about a business, what stories they have to tell, and then express that on social. Which
it's more of the messaging.
It is.
More of the story, really.
It is.
I mean, again, and I use several social media channels.
Yeah.
Some better than others, and I have my challenges just like anybody else does. But telling that story, creating the content, and that's one of the things where, in many cases, I mean, you can help draw that out when you're working with a client, but the client has to participate and figure out what that is.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And then, so as you're working and building this story, when you talk about social media, there's a lot of channels.
Yes.
There's a lot of channels.
Yes, new every day, right?
Yeah. So do you specialize, or what do you recommend for, and again, we're about small business owners. We're trying to figure out, how can we help people? What channels work? Should you start with? Where should you go? What are the ones that you like to use?
Well, I typically consider the big 4 to be Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Those are a good basis for a really strong social media presence. Now, I say that knowing that every business owner has different goals, perhaps, and has a different audience to reach. And so the right channels may be slightly different. You may not need Twitter, for instance, and Facebook may be stronger for you. But typically those four, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, are the main channels people use, and they cover a lot of bases. LinkedIn is professional. Facebook has more personality. If you're picking one to start with, I think typically Facebook is a good starter channel because it has the largest audience. It's the most popular channel. So no matter who your audience is, chances are they're spending some time there.
Okay, okay. I'm going to shift it a little bit because I meant to ask this question earlier. How did you get involved in journalism in the first place? I mean, this kind of, and I understand where you're at and what you're doing today, but why did you decide to go there?
It's what I always wanted to do. So even as a kid, I knew that's what I would do. I told my parents that I was going to be a foreign correspondent and live in cities all over the world, and they believed me. But I think it was a curiosity, a wanting to tell people stories and to get to know other ways of doing things and other types of people and communicate that information to the people sitting at home watching.
And what is it that you like about that? What is it that kind of...
So my favorite part of my job as a television anchor, which is still my favorite part of my job now, is that you go in the morning. In TV, you'd go in at 9 a.m., and by 11 p.m., I'd have to be an expert on something, right? Because I was going to talk about that thing on the news that night. And so I got to learn a lot about other industries and other businesses that I would never have been exposed to any other way. And it's still what I love about my job now. We work with clients in lots of industries, and I get to learn about their businesses and help them tell their stories. And
so learning in itself,
yeah,
just the idea of learning, I mean, we can learn a lot of different things, and I know I have a passion for learning as well. I mean,
yeah.
I just am always kind of, I just dial myself back because I can't do it all. I have
Right.
to focus in certain areas, but every now and then my brain will say, look, boy, I'd like to go learn that, or I'd like to go learn that. And I might kick the tires a little bit, see a little bit about it, but then I'll realize that, oh my God, that's like a bunch of hours or something before I could get any good at that, and so I might have to put that on the back burner. But just the concept of just always learning new stuff, learning and growing is kind of exciting. And then you get to share that with your clients.
Yeah, with the audience.
So when you talk to your clients and stuff, how do you see them as? I mean, again, you're what I would consider in all the interviews and stuff that I've done, a fairly exceptional learner. In other words, so you're fast, you're quick, you kind of pick it up. But talk about the clients that you're dealing with, the small business owners, and how are they applying the learning process? Because they've got to learn how to do this social media thing if they're going to go down that path.
Well, yes, and I think for a lot of people there's some fear involved because it's a great unknown at the beginning, and they're nervous and they don't understand really what social could do for them or how to use it for their business. And so the first part is sort of a decision that, yes, I want to figure out how this is going to work for me, and take that first step. And then, it's kind of baby steps. We've got to figure out how to set up the channels. Then you've got to figure out how to use the channels and what should I be posting. And then how am I going to create what I'm going to be posting. And so there's a process. The best businesses these days are ones that really understand their target audience and are able to communicate on their level. And social is a really powerful tool for that, but you have to understand how to use it in that way and use it the way your audience uses it and communicate in a way that they understand and not necessarily use it as a sales tool or a marketing tool. I don't like to think of it that way.
Well, I think that's a very important distinction.
Yeah. I like to think of it more as a communication tool, right? We're building a community around your area of expertise rather than I'm trying to promote something.
Yeah, I watched Seth Godin talk, and he talks about building a tribe, similar to doing that. Let's do this. Let's take the audience through the 4 stages of learning. It's a tool that we use in the coaching practice on a very frequent basis because, as an entrepreneur, business owner, a lot of times we have to learn new things. Right? We might be really good at what our technical expertise or our specialty is, in the sense that we've got a good legal, we're good at IT or dental, medical, those kinds of things, but that doesn't mean we're really good at running a business. And there are a couple of places where I think learning is constant, it's never going to go away, and it's actually going to go faster, right? Technology is that place where you have to keep working at it, right? It's you can't stay still, right? Unless you're retired. If you're retired and not working, and you're my stepmom who doesn't want to do any of that, and yet she's still found her way to become an iPad user and does her books and all this other kind of stuff. So
I was going to say, you can't avoid it in some ways.
you can't avoid it, and the challenge is that it's changing every day.
Yes.
Right? I just got an update on my phone.
Yes.
And it came at me, and my phone now has newer colors. It's pretty cool, but it's not working as well.
Oh,
right?
Yeah,
because
trade-offs.
my phone's almost 2 years old, and they just pumped all this new software into it, right? And so it kind of slowed it down.
Yeah.
It's half as fast as it was before, and so I'm going to have to go get a new phone. I mean, I think that's either that, or I'm going to have to go figure out how to do this. One way or another, I've been impacted.
There's a learning curve.
Without my consent. I didn't ask for this,
Yes.
and I had to do that. So let's go through this learning curve kind of thing here. So
Okay.
we're going to talk about the 4 steps to learning, and it's really the father of psychology, Dr. Abraham Maslow, put together the hierarchy of needs, also played a huge role in developing the 4 steps to learning. And so the little S that you see on the screen there represents the learning curve. Right? And I like it because it's kind of twisty. It's definitely not a straight line. All right.
Yes.
So the first stage. Oops, I went the wrong direction with my clicker there. The first stage is called unconscious incompetence, and at this particular stage, this is kind of, well, what's another term for unconscious incompetence?
Well, like you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Right.
Right. And I tell people this is one of the hardest places to be because you can't move off of this stage by yourself. You have to receive some stimulation from somewhere else, right? So somebody tells you something, you hear something, you learn something, you see something, somewhere along the line, you pick something up. But the cool thing is that once that happens, it's an instantaneous transformation to the next step. And the next step is called conscious incompetence. From a conscious incompetence standpoint, we now know of something. Now, the good news is now we're in control, right? But step 1, we aren't in control. We don't get to decide. But step 2, we do. We can make a decision at step 2 and say, listen, am I interested in learning some more, right? And if I'm interested in learning some more, then I can go to step 3, which is conscious competence. Now I can go learn how to do something, right? Now, some people think that's the finished point, but it's not really, because there are some places where just because you know how to do it doesn't mean you're any good at it. And the story I like to tell about is the one about the manual transmission car. So did you learn how to drive a manual transmission
I did.
car? Yeah.
I did.
And so how was that first week?
It was bumpy.
It was
Yeah,
bumpy.
It was bumpy.
It's bumpy. You saw out a couple times?
Yes.
I would say, thank
absolutely.
God I didn't live in San Francisco and have to go up those hills and learn on a manual transmission car. And so it's a pretty simple process in the sense that we know that you have to push in the clutch, you got to let out the gas, you got to shift the gears, and you got to let out the clutch, you got to push on the gas. Dad told me
Sounds easy enough.
30 seconds, right?
Yeah.
But then it's practice, right? And that's the key. The key to getting from stage 3 to stage 4, where we get some proficiency, is feedback and practice. And so when you do the shifting incorrectly, the car gives you some pretty immediate feedback that you did it wrong, and then you make a correction, right? So that's trial and error. That's the oldest learning tool in the history of mankind. So we go through trial and error until we get to the stage of proficiency, or what we call unconscious competence. Right? And then you get to decide what level proficiency is, right? If you're going to be a race car, you got to be a lot better at it. The race car driver, you got to be a lot better at it. But I'm not, and I just need to be able to drive around.
Sure.
And I went 20 years between driving manual transmission cars,
Oh.
and I picked it up right away. It's like riding a bike.
Okay.
And riding a bicycle is another one of those
I was
where
gonna
you got to
say.
practice. You got to get out and try it. The whole balance thing doesn't happen unless you practice and get some feedback. So if we were going to take our audience, our viewers, through this from a social media standpoint, in the unconscious incompetence, 10 years ago, there was no social media.
Right.
Actually, when did social media start?
Yeah, well, there are lots of dates, but yeah, I would say 10 or 12 years ago, there were the first inklings.
Okay.
2004.
All right.
Yeah.
And so then we heard about social media, but we didn't necessarily know what it meant. We didn't necessarily know how to do it. We didn't necessarily know what to do with it. But we moved immediately from step 1 to step 2.
Right.
Right. So step 2, pretend I'm the business owner, right?
Okay.
And step 2, I'm like, social media. What am I supposed to do? How do I move to step 3? What are the things that I have to do?
Well, as a business owner, your first step would be to define your audience. Who do you want to talk to, right?
Well, I want to talk to my customers.
Okay, but who are your customers? Who's that ideal customer?
Right, so we want to do some target market work.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So target market could be, the people that buy my services, but it could be, where are they located?
Yes.
Sometimes you can throw gender into that, male or female, because
Absolutely.
sometimes products fit in that case.
Absolutely.
Not that I want to be biased, but age plays a role in buying
does.
products. What are some of the other things that you've encountered that are really important?
Well, sometimes behavior or how they communicate. When we work with clients, we make them define, if your brand was a person, what personality does it communicate with? Do your customers like really formal speech and no contractions and that sort of thing, or can you be funny and relaxed, and are they going to connect with that? You have to know who the people you are trying to talk to are and how they want to talk. So I think that, and I think the things, the demographics you mentioned, age, gender, location, those are all really, really important.
They all play an important
Absolutely.
role. Okay, so we get defined, and then what's the next step?
So then you have to know what your goals are, right? What do you want this target market to do after these interactions with you via social media?
Yeah, well, ideally, I'd like them to buy my stuff.
Yes, but no one can buy things on Facebook, right? So we have to, there's a step in there,
right.
Some interim things. So do you want them to click through to your website, or do you want them to call you for a free consultation, or do you want them to show up at your event somewhere? There are all kinds of these things that could happen next as sort of the advancing the relationship step.
Okay.
And you need to be clear on what that step should be.
Okay.
Because all those things are possible, but they're different strategies on social media.
All right. Now, to get from step 2 to step 3, sometimes we have to go do some research. So
Yes.
we would have to understand what our market is, and the reality is that the business owner, leader, has to do that work.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can't do that. You'll engage what they ask you to, but that's what you have to do. And then when it comes to goals, they have to kind of figure out what that is, right? And then so now I got all that stuff, and I'm still interested in social media. How do I know which one? Where do I start?
Well, you've got a couple options, right? You can either dig in and sort of do the research and start to further the learning on your own, or you could engage someone to help you. You could attend a workshop. You could find a consultant or a strategist to help you. You could go on the web and look at a site like Social Media Today that has a lot of resource information on social media and do some reading. You could hire a book or buy a book.
Hire a book. I like that.
Yeah.
But you definitely buy a book.
Yes, read a book.
Yeah.
There's podcasts. There's a lot of information out there, but you have to decide how much do I want to do on my own and understand it, and how much do I want to call in an expert and have them help me through the process.
Right. This is the classic place here where we talk about moving from stage 2 to stage 3, where the business owner, limited resources. I mean, time is the most limited resource we have. There's only 24 hours. Nobody gets more.
Unfortunately.
And so you have to figure out, where can I spend my time? Where's the right kind of time? And this is where we see business owners engaging support resources,
right.
Advisors, trusted advisors that help them engage and do that kind of thing. Now, when a business owner starts looking in that direction, then they're classically going to be asking, what's my return on investment? If I spend some, we have the same thing from a time standpoint, right? Do I invest the time, and what's my return on investing the time? And when you invest money, you say, what's my return on the investment? Absolutely. What do I get in return? And so when the business owner is looking to maybe engage a resource for social media, what should they be thinking about from a return on investment? What should they look at? What's important?
Well, I think that you have to set some things that you're going to measure, right? Some metrics, because it depends on what your goal is. If you need something to drive traffic to your website, then we need to look at your analytics and see how many people are going to your website from social media. If you need people to sign up for your course, then we need to know how many people have visited the sign-up form to sign up for your course. So I think it's really important when you're defining your goals to also define how you're going to measure those goals. And what does success look like? We always ask our clients, what would have to happen to have you go, wow, this was a huge success. We hit it out of the park with this one.
Okay.
And then we architect something that gets us there, right? And how we're going to measure it. But when you're talking to an expert or a thought leader that you want to engage with, I would ask things like, tell me about the types of clients you work with and the types of goals you had tried to reach, and have you gotten to those goals, and can you tell me a case study or give me a referral to one of your clients I could speak to, that sort of thing. I think looking at track record is important with any
yeah, I agree.
Professional.
I agree.
Right? But in social media especially, it can be sort of a nebulous thing, because there's not a real strong knowledge base among most business owners. It can be easy to say, gosh, things are happening, but I don't know if they're the right things, or I don't know if they're happening the way I want them to happen, and you don't know what you don't know, right?
Right.
And so there needs to be a framework in place where you can see am I on the way to the goal that I set? And what kind of progress are we making there?
Yeah, so this thing really wraps its head around the whole digital marketing concept, right? And the challenge is, so we've had print media, advertising media.
Yeah.
You put stuff in a newspaper or in a magazine, or you build your own catalog or something of that sort. And then we've had television and we've had radio for a long time. And so how that works and what you're supposed to do, and there's some kind of rules. People have learned stuff over the last 50, 60 years, right? The challenge with digital marketing, social media playing a really big role in that, is that it doesn't have 50. We're still figuring out some of that stuff, right? How do I drag them how do I get them to the website? How do I get them to sign up the form and do that kind of thing? So there's a little bit of nebulousness, I guess, is the way you put it, in how that works. Now, I was talking about my cell phone earlier.
Yes.
I was talking about technology and how we don't have a choice. I don't have a choice with my phone. I got to go do something with it. What about digital marketing? Do we have a choice?
You could be a business that chooses not to be social and just stays away from it, but these days your customers are sort of demanding it of you. It's the way of the world. Social has changed the way we communicate in so many ways that it's given us the immediacy and the access that we never had to brands before. And so I think people are hard-pressed to give that up. I don't think our customers are going to say, oh, we don't want to do that? Okay, we won't talk to you that way. Most of them are demanding that kind of interaction.
Well, we would say digital marketing, we're talking websites too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right? And social media feeds the website.
Yes.
Right? So if you put the website together, do you go through and that would be my phone that's
you're in
Isn't
demand.
That terrible? Right in the middle of the show.
That's good. So the website is also important, right? I mean, your website is really your hub online, and all of these things around it, your social media sites and that sort of thing, are the satellites around that hub. But all of this is important for building a framework,
Well, but digital marketing isn't going away. It's just becoming more. Technology isn't going away. It's just becoming more. So I would argue, and that maybe not everybody's going to believe me, that you don't have a choice. I mean, you have to embrace technology to stay up. And you actually have to continue to learn about technology and grow, because if you stay static, then you're going to fall behind. It's like being on a downward escalator, right? If you don't keep walking up the escalator, we fall. We get back to the bottom.
Yeah.
And so it seems to me like you don't really have a choice. And so applying this learning model that we talked about earlier to digital marketing is a necessity.
Well, yeah, and you don't have to love it, but at some point you have to navigate it and be able to understand how it's going to work.
You don't have to be a business owner either.
No.
You can do whatever you want.
Sure.
But if you're going to be a business owner, I think you got to go do this. I don't think you have a choice.
Yeah, it's getting that way, isn't it?
And you've got to get to a certain degree of proficiency so that you can manage, so that you understand what's going on and you can manage your business effectively. Well, I think this has been really, I've enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
It's been good. And I think we came up with 3 things that we think business owners should start to do if they're going to go social media or digital marketing at all, right?
Yes.
First thing was target market, right?
Yeah, define your audience. Who do you want to talk to?
Yeah, and we had a list of things that we thought might apply to that. And then the second one was goals. Define
your goals, yeah.
Goals. And we talked about what do we want them to do. We want them to go to the website. We want them to click here. We want them to engage, comment, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And then the third thing was some
figure out how deep you're going to go into the learning process, right? You've got to do some research in having an expert help you, or becoming that expert yourself.
Okay.
Because even to your point earlier, even if you're just going to let someone else handle it and you're going to manage the process, you have to understand enough to manage the process, to know if that's going well.
I'm going to interact. I think we talked about metrics too.
Yes.
Right? And I think metrics actually happens before you start doing the research, right? How are you going to measure your goals? So the 3 things were target market, goals, metrics. How are you going to measure it?
Yes.
And then we got to do the research. We got to go figure out where do we want to go, which channel, do we want to engage a resource, do we want to engage a support service or something like that. Now I know that you do this and you actually have a program coming up here in the very near future.
Yeah, next month.
Please share a little bit for our viewers. How can they learn more?
Sure. It's our social media boot camp workshop. It covers those big 4 channels we talked about: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And it will give them enough knowledge to to know what they want to do with them from there on out. And there's a tab on my website. You can check it out for more information.
Okay, so it's KatieWagnerSocialMedia.com.
That's perfect.
And if you're on the website, the BusinessWhitt website, there's a link, KatieWagnerSocialMedia.com there. Do you have a special email or telephone number you want to get, or you want to direct them just to the website?
You can visit the website, or you can always email me if you have questions. It's Katie@KatieWagnerSocialMedia.com.
Thanks, Katie. This has been great. I really appreciate it.
It's been fun.
All right, for those of you out there in viewer land, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Make it a great week. Take care.